Yes, we can see.
Are you seeing the presenter view or with my notes, or are you seeing it as the full screen?
As the full screen. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining right on time. And as I've shared today, we really have a special guest with us, Dr. Clare, who has really done a lot of work in anthropology. Dr. Clare, we've had some other sessions on social sciences, and as maybe you'll see in the chat, the group is multidisciplinary. We have people from different diverse courses, all the way from engineering, veterinary sciences, medical sciences, and also social sciences. So we are really looking at how to build, a multidisciplinary approach, especially among young people, so that we are able to appreciate that each one of us has a big role to play in the fight against AMR. So I'll just take a few minutes, Dr. Clare, to introduce you, then I think we can start off. So our guest today is Dr. Clare, who is a medical anthropologist, and she leads the Anthropology of Antimicrobial Research Group at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which aims to bring critical social scholarship to global health topics, which includes AMR. And she also co-founded the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine Antimicrobial Research Center, which works to inspire innovation through interdisciplinary engagements. I'm sure some of us have heard about it. And she's known for her anthropological works on medicines and healthcare in resource-limited settings. And her research is primarily ethnographic, but it also incorporates historical, epidemiological, and interventional approaches. And her long-term research has taken place in Uganda and Tanzania, and she also has led studies in Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Sierra Leone, Malawi, Zimbabwe, India, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and United Kingdom. So as we can see, she really has a lot of exposure to different countries in different contexts within the world, and she has keen capacity. She has keen interest in capacity strengthening, both in practice and as a research topic. And she has provided technical advice to the UK government, World Health Organization, low and middle-income countries, governments, and the media on topics such as Ebola, malaria, and AMR. And she serves on numerous professional and policy committees internationally. So welcome so much, Dr. Clare. It's really a great pleasure, and we are really humbled and to have you speak with us today and share your knowledge and insights with us. So thank you so much and welcome. We can start over to you.
Thank you, and it's a privilege to be able to speak to this group. And I've heard about the work of the Students Against Superbugs Network before, and it's really impressive. And I think it's a really, really important stage of careers for people to be engaging with this kind of topic, which is so complex and really requires careful thinking across different disciplines. And I think having students come together to discuss these kinds of topics from different disciplines in different countries is a huge strength of this platform. So it's a great pleasure to be able to be with you today, and I look forward to having a bit of a discussion with you at the end of my presentation too. And thank you everybody for introducing yourselves in the chat as well. It's really nice to see who I'm talking to. So I'm going to talk today about, I've been given a really nice brief from Daniel and colleagues. So I was asked to talk about the contribution of anthropology to antimicrobial resistance mitigation. And I was even given some learning outcomes for our session. So by the end of the session, we're hoping that you will all gain a basic understanding of the field of anthropology, appreciate the need for an interdisciplinary approach when addressing AMR, and the role that anthropology can play in that, and also to identify some of the gaps in AMR interventions that might be being rolled out in your contexts, and to be inspired to bring on board and ideate on innovative interdisciplinary approaches for tackling AMR. So hopefully we'll get there through the session today. So in the outline, we're going to start off with talking about the anthropology of AMR. Then we'll talk about antibiotic use. That'll be the main section. And then we'll talk about multidisciplinary. So start off here. So why take an anthropological approach to AMR? Well, you might be wondering, you know, antimicrobial resistance is something that we often think of as a microbial problem, something about microbial transmission or genetic transmission. We might think of it as something that's caused by antimicrobial use, but we might also start to think, antimicrobial resistance is as much a problem for as it is a problem from scientific development, that it's actually scientific developments that have not only produced antibiotics, but also produced our overuse of antibiotics. We might also start to look at awareness of the public and say, well, maybe that's an area for AMR concern. We might also start looking at policy and think about, is the balance right between the different agendas that are being tried to be chased after that have an impact on AMR, or that might be trying to address AMR. And we might also think about AMR as a problem that requires economic investment. These are all very different domains of science and policy and publics and economics that all are really important in thinking about when we're going to address a problem like antimicrobial resistance. And each of these is done by people. And therefore, each of these different ways of thinking and different ways of studying has a social life. Whether you're talking about microbial transmission or economic investment, the ways that we make these things matter, the stories that we tell to try to communicate what we're doing, the ways that we try to make things count, all have a social life, and I would argue actually a biosocial life. And this is what anthropologists study. Anthropologists study the ways that humans and non-humans are in the world, how the world is made sense of, how it's acted on and brought into being in particular ways. So there are the aspects of antimicrobial resistance that I've listed are amenable to study by anthropologists. And these are some of the ones that I'm going to talk about today. So often in anthropology, our job is to make things visible that are implicit and taken for granted. We want to identify the things that are making people's lives, their social, biological, or biosocial lives that unfold in the ways that they unfold. So what are the things that shape our experiences, that shape the meaning and significance attached to doing and saying and being particular ways, that shape the possibilities and visions of the ways that we are in the world? As an anthropologist, many people expect that we will be asking, what is their culture? How can culture be overcome so that we can have better public health, for example? But actually, it's not just the case that culture is the thing that is operating that we need to find out about and then add some knowledge so that people can overcome it. But actually, that's a quite outdated model. Today, anthropologists tune in to far more than is possible with a cultural model. Culture implies that that's something that's sitting sort of above where we are. Perhaps in this picture, culture would sit somewhere in the sky there, and it would operate above all of us and make us behave in particular ways. But actually, the ways now that we understand how people are in the world includes attention not to those shared ideologies that might be considered as cultural, but actually a grounded, finely grained attention to the material, biological, virtual and organizational and ideological and visceral ways of living and dying. To understand how people are in the world cannot be restricted to a disconnected analysis of a social world that is separable from a natural world. So this is to say, often when we're learning biology or medicine or epidemiology, we divide the world into natural and cultural domains, or nature and culture, or nature and the social world. But actually, that imagines that culture is something up here and the natural is something down here. But if we look down here, of course, we see many things that are cultural, that are norms, that are expected, that become common sense in one place, but to the outside eye might actually seem quite unusual. And that's the eye that we bring when we do anthropology. We always try to bring a kind of eye that makes what might be familiar in one situation strange enough that we can see how common sense is being made. Anthropological studies in AMR include the study of AMR itself, the ways that microbes are screened in particular places, screened perhaps in hospitals with particular consequences, or screened at borders. What are the political ramifications of screening, of the groups that are produced at the advent of screening? What are the uncertainties that are involved in screening? All of these things have social lives and social consequences. Anthropological studies look at border controls, the way that borders are brought into being as not just public health apparatus, but political apparatus, that they are then mobilized with the same kinds of anxieties as that we have, for example, with immigration, that migration concerns around the movement of microbes can become immigration, interchangeably concerns with immigration, which we have, unfortunately, anybody who's tried to get a visa to the UK will know is a great issue here. Water and sanitation, lots of anthropological study on how we can understand how to do this better. Water and sanitation activities have been going on for a very long time. It's the founding part of public health is the John Snow story with the Broad Street pump. But we really still have a lot of challenges to provide clean water and effective sanitation to all our populations in the world. How can we imagine to address antimicrobial resistance if we can't get this basic thing right? Infection prevention control is also an area for anthropological interest and intervention. We can't deal with antimicrobial resistance in hospitals unless we get this right. And despite knowing all the way back from Semmelweis's studies in the Viennese hospitals, where he found that it's the transmission of infection was through people the clinicians not washing their hands and moving between labouring mothers. All the way through since then, we've known what to do, and yet we still see a lot of IPC issues. Why is that? Also, human-animal environment relations. Of course, this is a classic for anthropology, because we're really interested in the holistic picture of how people are in the world. And that means not seeing and refusing to be trapped into the silos that are created by something we call sectors that make us think within a particular narrow paradigm. And of course, these kinds of pictures are all part of the social story of AMR. This is a picture that tells us about the cycle. Is it a cycle? It tells us that it's moving in particular directions. It tells us that the human is quite important, that everything else is going around and then coming back to the human. This is part of the way that we tell our stories in in tropical medicine and in infectious diseases. For much of the enlightened scientific era, our imagery of infectious disease has relied on compartmentalism of human, animal, insect, and environmental realms, characterized by linear arrows and cyclical feedback loops. Infection of humans is depicted in terms of pathogens traversing these realms, and in this perspective, humans are then considered separate and separable from the natural reservoirs of infectious disease. So there we see this division of the human and the natural. Through apparatus such as DDT or extermination, physical barriers, characteristic of hygienic modernity, we are able to visualize a disease-free humanity separated from nature and separable from nature. Such imagined boundaries have increasingly, though, been questioned, particularly by anthropologists and other social scientists who are drawing attention to other ways of seeing disease. And at other times, the ways that disease is unseen. So the depictions of arrows, drivers, factors as linear processes of infection from the outside in become increasingly insufficient to account for disease in the context of these dissolved boundaries. And this becomes particularly apparent when you think about the story of the microbiome. The fact that we had for such a long time tried to keep ourselves in a vision of a disease-free humanity that could be separated from nature. And the ways that we do this through some kind of separation technique to keep something from the outside in. Of course, when we are talking about the microbiome and recognizing that actually our bodies are made up of so many other microbes that are part of us and that are inseparable from us, this challenges this idea of purification and the ability to exterminate the microbial world from the human world. So this is just an example of some of the ways in which anthropologists start to question some of the ways that our scientific legacies and our scientific stories are told that lead us to imagine and reinscribe the world in particular ways that may prevent us from being able to understand how the world is actually working, or other versions and stories of the world. Of course, with transmission, we've seen a shift in recent years to seeing emergence, to seeing the ways that diseases can emerge and disappear. And we've seen this also become concerned around the ideas of entanglement, the fact that we're not just seeing diseases emerge and then become sort of as a superficial level on top of populations, but they become entangled with life and with different microbial ecologies and different parts of the fabric of life, such that we see material and biotic or bacterial interdependencies. So the dominant etiological approaches then require a reformulation to enable the views of human and non-human agencies weaving themselves around the ways that energy and matter and history are all operating interconnectedly to create this kind of fabric into which new diseases might evolve and take hold. And anthropology adds this fine-grained analysis to these interdependencies. It's not just telling is social and abstract and about the culture. Telling us about the ways that we are constructing our microbial resistance. On the wider studies of anthropology, of science, I've got here a picture of Emily Martin's, to remind us of Emily Martin's work. She's showed that the ways that conception was talked about, with the sperm being talked about with particular metaphors around being very strong, being really able to pierce and move forward and thrust, all of these very strong, powerful words were used to describe the efforts of the sperm in the moment of conception. And by contrast, that the egg is described in this way of being passive and receiving and waiting. Now, these, of course, are ways that we talk about men and women and their roles in many societies. And certainly the people that were writing these textbooks in the places that Emily Martin was doing this study were coming from a perspective where these